Today's speakers are Ashley and Anthony Burch. They are siblings. They work in the game industry. Ashley is a voice actress. She's best known for her roles as Chloe Price from Life is Strange and Tiny Tina from Borderlands 2. Who knows those games? Yeah, good.
Sweet.
Anthony was the head writer for Borderlands 2, and he currently works at Riot Games. Ashley is also currently writing and developing a show for Nickelodeon called Glitch Techs. So keep your eyes open for that. Ashley and Anthony also co-created the surreal comedy web series, Hey Ash, What You Playin'? Please welcome Ashley and Anthony Burch.
I'm Ashley Burch, as Dan said. I'm a voice actor and a writer. I wrote for Adventure Time for a while, rest in peace, and have voice acted in a bunch of different games, Chloe Price in Life is Strange, Tiny Tina in Borderlands 2, I was Cassie Cage in Mortal Kombat X. I'm also a professional sister to Anthony Burch.
I have played all of those games. I'm currently a writer at Riot Games on their world building team. For about 5 years, I worked at Gearbox on the Borderlands franchise. I was lead writer of Borderlands 2. I was a writer on pre-sequel, and then I helped write the Telltale game as well. And today we're here to talk to you about one of the, I don't want to say most beloved characters of Borderlands 2, but certainly one of the most known, I guess, of Borderlands 2 is Tiny Tina.
There's going to be a lot of us not
self-deprecating,
so just be
That's how we do. It's on our family crest. So first we're going to talk about the writing process. So when it comes to the creative process, I don't know, I just wrote the shit. I got a job to write characters for Borderlands 2, and so I did it, and it was fun. But it was, of course, a little bit more complicated than that, because working in AAA game development, as I did when I worked on at Gearbox, everything you write comes with a series of constraints. And so I had goals going into the creation of Tiny Tina specifically. Goals were to make a new character who fit in Borderlands because it was a sequel. We wanted new characters. We didn't want to make it feel like the world was just this one small area with only 4 or 5 different NPCs you can meet. But they needed to be distinct from everybody else. Borderlands 1 had basically had a lot of space rednecks. It had a lot of Western tropes. I wanted something really, really different than that. But she needed to have a gameplay functionality that mattered to the story, because the way AAA game development works, if I wanted to come up with a character that was going to be fully modeled and fully voice acted and have her own special animations, that character better be really important, because that's hours and hours and hours and hours of people's lives. And so Tiny Tina's functionality was, we knew we needed somebody that represented explosives as a character. Which I know sounds weird,
Your job's
but
so dumb.
Stupid ass job. Stupid dumb job they shouldn't have paid me for. Because we had a character called Scooter, who was the car character. So when you needed to learn stuff about cars, he was the guy who told you. We had a character called Marcus, who was the gun guy. He told you about guns. We didn't have somebody for explosives and bombs and stuff like that. And so we thought, okay, well, maybe that character, rather than being what you'd expect, which would be a big guy with, dynamite strapped to his biceps or whatever, who we ended up still making in the form of Mr. Torque. We thought it'd be fun to make it and by we I mean me and some other people, until they got on board, and then we were all fine. Thought it'd be fun to make it a smaller character, a tiny girl named Tiny Tina. And then also I wanted to just write a character for Ash because it would make my life easier, and it would be fun. So the inspirations for Tiny Tina were Ash's character from our web series, Hey Ash, What You Playin', who's basically just this creature of unfiltered id. She just sort of says random things, says whatever comes to her mind. We'll draw random cultural references from everywhere and just sort of spew them out like a vomit. That was a great metaphor. And then our friend Christina, who basically almost all of Tiny Tina's speaking style, which I got in trouble for later, came from her. It was our little white friend, Christina. The fact that she's white will be relevant later on. And then that was really it. When it comes to writing a character, at least for Borderlands, one of the sort of things I tried to do was imagine them just saying a single sentence and knowing at the end of that sentence what that character is all about, what the point of them is. And if I can get one sentence down that feels like, okay, I get this character, then it's okay to move on. That won't work as well for other games. If you're writing something that's more narratively focused, that's probably a little too shallow. But because Borderlands is a game that was about throwing guns and numbers and all kinds of random shit at you, I needed a character that would rise above all that information, that noise, and that would actually stick out. And that, incidentally, is what makes a lot of people hate her, but it's also what makes a lot of people remember her and like her.
Do you remember what the sentence was for Tina?
I believe it was. I think it was the Badonkadonks and Booty Like Pow line. Do you remember that line?
got a gut full of dynamite and a booty like pow.
Yeah, it was that. So there were some hiccups involved because that's how the creative process works. So the first one was because Tina was so different from established Borderlands characters, they tried with her initial design to make her look like an existing Borderlands character. So basically, rather than being a cute girl in a skirt that was, splattered with blood, that sort of, which is the ultimately where we landed, which is the exact kind of dichotomy I wanted of little girl in a really harsh world. She was just basically mini tank girl. She had like a big gun and she had like an army hat. And she looked like cool, but she didn't. It wasn't conveying what I wanted to convey with the character, which is the innocence in this world of bloodshed and craziness. So we went back and forth on that for actually a long time until we eventually got to a place where we were both happy, and she had the psycho mask and all that stuff was cool. And then once the game came out, a couple of white dudes basically said that the character and the way that she spoke was racist, and basically had to sort of work around that, not from a PR point of view, but from a me crying alone and going, am I racist for 6 months after the game came out kind of way. And then ultimately for the DLC that we did, I doubled down on having her speak all kinds of different random stuff. So she spoke Japanese and Spanish and all kinds of stuff to hammer home the idea, not that she was specifically trying to pretend to be a young black girl, but that she was taking influences from everywhere and just sort of turning it into mush and then spitting it back out. And yeah, it was two white guys trying to act woke, I think, is ultimately what it was. And then Ash.
So before, going further, kind of the origin of Tina was sort of the culmination of my entire history with Anthony. So we're siblings. We are siblings. And our relationship has kind of always been built on shared love of different types of media, video games, TV shows, movies, and also goofs. So much of my life when I started becoming more adventurous with my goofing was always, the goal was always trying to make Anthony laugh, basically. And so that was what our relationship was often built on, is that we would go back and forth and just try to make each other laugh. So when Anthony told me that he'd written a character and that they were that Gearbox was going to allow me to audition for it, A, I was terrified. But B, oh yeah, right. It's not the spooky Japanese horror film. But again, I had to return to my original goal, which is if you have any interest in acting, you'll learn very quickly. It's very similar to dating in that you will never know what you did wrong if you don't get the part. If you're trying to flirt with someone or whatever, and they're not receptive to it, it could be 1,000 things about you that they don't like. It's the same thing with auditioning. So it was actually kind of great having this be, because this was my first real role that I ever got. And so it being a role that I knew that my brother wrote, I had the extreme advantage of knowing his humor style and everything. And so rather than this horrifying thing that I was kind of belaboring over, I just sort of returned to one, and the basis of my relationship with Anthony was what's something that I think will make Anthony laugh? And if Anthony laughs and he likes it, even if I don't get the part, it's not a big deal. Because really the only thing you can do when you get an audition is to say, what is the thing that I think is unique about this character? What would I do with this particular role? And then you do it. And then you hope that it coincides with either what they were thinking of for the character, or it surprises them so much and they like it so much that they change the character.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
And that may sound nepotistic, like she was just trying to get me to hire her for the part, but that actually wasn't how it happened, basically, because even though I had written it with Ash in mind, I wanted to recuse myself from any accusations of nepotism, so I said, we can't audition Ash first, we have to audition a bunch of other people, and I will give no feedback, and I will leave it entirely up to everybody else. And so we auditioned 5 or 6 other actors, and then we auditioned Ashley, and I refused to say anything at any point, and everybody's like, well, it's obviously the last chick. And I was like, that's my sister, ha ha!
Suckers! Gotcha!
So that was really the audition process. It was mainly I got the sides for Tina, and I sort of just thought, what would Anthony find funny? What do I think would work for his voice? Because we'd been doing Hey Ash at that point for
3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years. So we were pretty much on the same page with, we always kind of have been, but what we think is funny, and in particular, and this character was so much, like Anthony said, it's a distillation of our good friend Christina, and then also a character that we've been writing for 4 years. Then I got the part, hooray. But if you are an actor or you know anyone that's an actor, you know that's kind of the most terrifying part, because then you actually have to deliver the goods. When you audition, you're like, haha, I'll never get this, hilarious. And then when you get it, you're like, oh God, I actually have to do the actual job now, which is the terrifying part. So it was my first session ever as a voice actor. Very spooky, much like the audition, the Japanese horror film. But again, it became my guiding light throughout the entire thing was what will make Anthony laugh. So I was really scared in the booth. It was my very first session. Everyone was very supportive, though. I think Eric Vale was there, Anthony was there, and Anthony was actually directing me. And so very quickly, I kind of realized that it was just another one of those goof sessions where I would try something, and if Anthony laughed, I knew it was good, and then we would move on and kind of joke back and forth in that way. So it was not rigid at all, and it was extremely collaborative and kind of just like Anthony and I hanging out and being goofy and making Hey Ash, which we had already been doing for like 4 years. And so coming down to how Tina kind of ended up where she ultimately is in the game, we talked about, Anthony's development and as writing Tina and what he was interested in and what his goals were. And that's a really important part of the development process because I don't know if you've ever worked with someone that is too flexible, that doesn't have a great idea of what they want, it's maddening because you're like, I need you to point me north and then I will help you get there. But if you don't have an idea of what you actually want, I can't give you anything. I'm just firing in the dark and I have no idea how to make this thing that you want to make and bring it to life if you don't actually have a direction. So the great thing about Anthony was that he had a very solid idea of what he wanted Tina to be. But he also was extremely, this is going to be complimenting Anthony time, so he'll get really uncomfortable.
Just give it to me.
But if you talk to any of the actors that worked on Borderlands 2, the main thing they'll always say is that they were so appreciative of how open Anthony was to collaboration.
Stop now, it's weird.
But it's true. So a lot, again, I don't know how many of you have like theater backgrounds if you've worked with people or if you act, but you'll have, directors or writers that will go insane unless you do the word perfect reading of the line, or they'll have a very specific way they hear it in their head and they won't stop until they get that exact read out of you. Anthony was not that way at all. It might have been sometimes a reflection of him thinking that his writing was bad, which it never was, but he wanted the actors to surprise him and he wanted to know what they wanted to bring to the characters that they were making. And so it ended up feeling a lot like play. Like I was saying, my first session as Tina was kind of just Anthony and I goofing back and forth. Obviously, people were getting paid and I had lines to read, but it felt very playful. And it kind of felt like we were trying to one-up each other. And that was the main thing about, is the main thing about collaboration and about play is that you always have to keep in mind that you're serving the larger product that you're making. I mentioned just 5 seconds ago about writers or directors that have very, very, very specific, rigid ideas of what they want the character, the film, the whatever to be. And while, of course, you need a vision of some kind, if you are not amenable to what your collaborators are bringing to it, then you're not actually using the full potential of the people that you've brought into the fold with you. And so the goal is always to be thinking about what is the final product that we're making and how can this person that I have hired, that I've selected, help me elevate this product. And that means being open to changing a line if it isn't working, or going in a direction that you weren't anticipating going because you've been shown something else that's more exciting or more interesting. And it's all kind of about alley-oops. A lot of the stuff that we ended up doing was Anthony would set something up and I would kind of add on to it and that would give him an idea and then we would do a different thing. And so a lot of it is just, it's passing the ball back and forth, and it's really not the idea of just like holding on to this very firm idea of what you had. It's about it being a living experience and having the flexibility to change and to make decisions with each other rather than just following a blueprint that you've set up before. Did you know that the reason April and Andy ended up dating in Parks and Rec is because Aubrey Plaza thought that April would think Andy was cute in one of the ensemble scenes, so she started staring at him flirtatiously, and the writers noticed, and thus began the greatest romance ever penned? That's what it's like. So in reshaping Tina, after our first session, Anthony found a bunch of things about the choices that I was making that he liked. And in our next session, he started playing more to the strengths that I brought to the character, which basically means that he forced me to make up songs for 30% of my lines. But we ended up doing a lot of
Read that sentence like it's a song.
He forced me to make up songs for 30% of my lines.
See, it's so easy.
It's so easy. But it helped us kind of, once we already had a baseline for Tina, which is songs are funny, the raps are funny,
Her quoting Drake is funny.
Her quoting Drake is funny. Certain things like that. It let us decide, okay, we have this baseline for this character now that we've developed together. So where are other areas that we want to push her? What are things that we think would be funny to make the, like when we did the Torg DLC, the idea that Tina had a crush on Moxie was something that Anthony thought of. Did that actually end up going in the game, though? Kind of.
Barely. Basically, the higher-ups at Gearbox were like, we don't think it's appropriate for a 13-year-old girl to have a crush on an adult. I was like, have you met anyone who's 13? And they were like, well, it's inappropriate. And so I went, fine, and I hid some lines in there. And they're hard to find, but they're there.
But we would do stuff like that, and then also, the Assault and Dragon Keep DLC is a lot about, everyone's played Borderlands 2, right? Can I spoil it?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter,
It's
right?
too late.
Roland dies, sorry.
Roland's a character. There's a character who's Tina's friend, and he dies, and the DLC is.
And the DLC is kind of her way of dealing with that grief, but in a very Tina way, where she forces all of her friends to play a D&D game where they save Roland and he's not actually dead. But because we'd established this character of Tina, we were able to sort of think about, like, okay, Anthony had the idea of, like, how would she deal with grief? There would probably be a lot of denial and pretending that she could fix it and all that kind of stuff. But because we kind of created this foundation of who she was, we were open to exploring more interesting pathways with her. There's also a part, is very small, is it in the Torg DLC? Where you find out that how her parents died?
No, it's in the first game. It's in the
first game, yeah. So there's a echo that you can find that you kind of learn how Tiny Tina's parents die, and it's from a psycho, and that's why she has the tea party at the beginning. But we'd established that sort of dark idea of her kind of sequestering painful memories in the back of her mind, and then presenting just insanity and all that kind of stuff. So the DLC was a great opportunity for us to explore, like, what happens when you have to actually confront the dark part, which is kind of weird to talk about for, like, a game that's, she's a 13-year-old that likes explosives. But again, because we developed the character and people seemed to really respond to her, we were actually able to justify making that DLC. Whereas if we hadn't done all that work, I think, Tina she would have been a fun character that probably would never have justified having an entire DLC about her going through the grief of her friend. So the basic gist is that open collaboration will always lead to a better product. But of course, you need to start with a vision and distinct goals. Like I said earlier, I've worked with people before that are far too rigid. I've worked with people before that have no idea what they want, and they're kind of like, well, what would you do with it? I'm like, I mean, you have to you have to outline a few things for me to be able to fill out the rest of the world that you want to make. Otherwise, I'm just firing in the dark. And because of that, trust is paramount. Anthony and I had the benefit of knowing each other for literally our entire lives and collaborating for like 4 years before we even started Borderlands 2. But I think that's the hard thing that a lot of people, when they're casting, when they're developing a team of any kind, really, is that you really just have to put a lot of time into casting and hiring, and then trust your team. There's a lot of people that will hire folk and then not know how to delegate, and they'll still want to keep everything really close to their chest. But that's the whole point of casting and the whole point of hiring, is that you bring on people that you respect, that are exciting to you.
That are better than you.
That are better than you with the thing that you want them to do, and then you trust them. And again, any time that I've worked with any collaborators that are open to their actors and cast, intelligently, will always be surprised and happy with the collaboration, and it always elevates it. It was the same thing on Life is Strange. It was the same thing with Tiny Tina. Those are the most successful and enriching experience for everyone involved, when you really trust people. Is this for Chloe? Or you could just hire your siblings, I guess.